I'm bad with names, as everybody knows, but the student who got hit by the vehicle and his brains were leaking out. But
Yes.
that wasn't really an act of violence. That was an accident.
You saw the aftermath, though. I think that's important.
Aftermath.
You didn't see it happen, right? There's a difference.
Right.
And Gage, you didn't see the accident happen, right? And really, that's all the violence that had been in the film up to that point. And, then a dead cat, right? So that is, you're an hour and 20 minutes into the film, and that's like the first act of actually like attacking violence. So maybe that's what it is in this film that makes it so unsettling.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because even when you see, when Judd's telling the story of, sometimes dead is better, and he's telling the story of the first zombie that came back, and you see that zombie like clawing his face and everything, there's still an air of safety, I guess is the word.
Yeah.
Where like you can still look at it, you're like, oh, well, zombie. Yeah, okay, whatever. And you didn't see him get hurt or anything. He's just sitting there digging stuff. Okay. Oh, scary. But like, yeah, I do. I agree with you guys. I think that's just a moment where the violence actually crosses over, and I think makes this a really interesting film from sort of like an escalation standpoint, because, well, previous to that, the slasher genre has been going strong by the time this movie comes out. And I can't think of another movie from the time period even then that practiced that much restraint.
Yeah.
That let it build until the end, that didn't have like some big gruesome killing in the first reel to get you that first shock.
Mm-hmm. One of the plot elements that I want to talk about, like, again, it's been so long since I've read the book, so I don't know if it's more clear in the novel. But in the movie, watching it, I didn't quite get that Ellen Creed, right? Denise Crosby's character is Ellen?
Rachel.
Yeah, I think so. Rachel.
Patsy.
Rachel!
Betty. Suzanne, whatever her name is. Anyways,
her name is Tasha Yar. Go ahead.
Tasha Yar. So...
This is what Denise Crosby left Star Trek for, folks.
I know, absolutely. She did. This is crazy. And then the next time I saw her was in season 4 of The Walking Dead when they're the cannibals. But
she was in a few episodes of Lois and Clark in between then and that. But go ahead.
So I didn't quite get that at the beginning of the film she doesn't want to talk about death. Like, I mean, I don't know did you guys catch that with the character? She doesn't want to address it. She doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't want to acknowledge it. And I didn't quite get that that's what they were going for in the film. It just seemed weird that they were, like, dancing around it. I don't know, like, it was just something that I kind of missed until actually I watched the bonus features on the Blu-ray this time around, and I'm like, okay. And then the Zelda plot line tied in and finally made sense to me. Because, I've seen the movie more, and I didn't really understand why the Zelda plotline was in this, right? And it's to acknowledge the fact that this woman doesn't want to talk about death, she doesn't want to address death, and when the neighbor when Judd starts talking about death and takes them to the pet cemetery, that's why she's upset, is because she doesn't want to be talking about dead things with her kids yet.
I picked up on it. I don't think that it's communicated particularly well with the performance, but I think that the cues are there, and then when she tells the Zelda story, then it does click. I do think that the way that it builds doesn't work the way that they would have intended, because to your point, she acts very odd about talking about death, and she's very upset about it in that one scene where she's in the kitchen and not handling it, and it seems to have ramped up too quickly.
Yeah.
I understand that in real life it can happen like that, because stuff comes flooding back and overwhelms you, but in terms of story progression, it seems too sudden, and then the Zelda thing has to sort of retroactively justify it.
Right. And see, like, I didn't connect that's why she didn't go to the funeral of the house cleaner, right? And so like I watched the movie and I didn't catch those connections, and it felt like something was kind of missing, and that I would have caught more had I read the book more recently, but it didn't quite work in the film. And so she didn't go to the funeral because she didn't want to address death at all, but the husband and the daughter went to the funeral, and then that's what prompted her to start talking about it with her dad.
I'll say this. I think, when you adapt a book into a movie, right, you kind of can shuffle things around, you can delete things, you can add things. If I were adapting this book into a movie, I would just delete that subplot because I think the story worked fine without it.
Yeah.
And you can
Like
just change a
Zelda
couple
plot
things
as
here
well?
and there. No, that's what I mean. They delete the whole
Yeah.
Zelda subplot. You don't need it, I don't think.
Yeah, because it's very Stephen King. Like that type of
Yes,
flashback
yes.
is a very Stephen King thing. Like Stephen King's I love Stephen King and I love reading his books, but he does have a lot of these tangents that's a part of the way that he tells a story, where you'll get a lot of back history for a character. And so the first time rewatching this movie after a really long time, I'm just like, well, this is one of these weird things that didn't quite seem necessary, but they just kept in because it was creepy. And then it took listening to the director commentary and listening to some of the bonus features to realize why that plot was in the movie.
The defense I would give for it, and would argue, I'm sitting in the mythical editor's chair and this discussion comes up. You guys come in and you're like, oh, do you really need this subplot? I would argue it's necessary because it's a counterpoint to the dead college ghost that's coming around. The husband and the wife both have these ghosts that haunt them that have to do with death, and it's both its finality, but also its enduring impact. And so their reactions to these ghosts that they carry around with them inform that stuff. Now, I completely will accede to the fact that it could have been executed more effectively. I think that there are things that misfire and don't quite line up along the way, but I like the idea that they both have these ghosts that they're carrying around with them, and she has a ghost she's been carrying around her whole life, and he has a ghost that's just attached to him, but they're both affecting them in traumatic ways, and they're coming to the same point of having to discuss this thing finally.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because that's something that they have to consider when they're doing an adaptation of a novel. Like, what is it that you take out and what is it that you leave in? And I know that when we get to the remake in a couple of weeks here, that Zelda is in the remake as well. So it's a plot that they've decided to keep in. So it'll be interesting to see if it flows a bit better, or if maybe I just understand more now that I've listened to the commentary and listened to the information. Because another thing that I didn't pick up on the film, I didn't pick up as an intention that Mary Lambert was talking about in the commentary, was that the dead student she considers like the good guardian angel, and she considers Judd the bad guardian angel, like the bad angel in this, because Judd is the one who instigates all the bad. Like he's this lovable old man, but he instigates everything bad that happens in the film. So, and I didn't catch that parallelism. Like, maybe I just didn't understand in the translation and whatnot. And again, maybe this is more clear in the novel. But once I heard her say that, I'm like, okay, yeah, now I see what you're doing, but I just didn't quite catch it when I was watching the movie.
I wouldn't have gone as far as to call him the bad angel, but that definitely makes a lot of sense because Judd very suddenly, he makes the decision that the daughter isn't ready to talk about death yet. So in a sense, he takes the decision over from the Creed family and says, no, I decide that she's not ready for it. And he knows full well what this can lead to. And as a result, he imparts knowledge that, there's almost a great thing about him because it's a commentary on wisdom. True wisdom is knowing how to apply the knowledge that you have, and he applies it in the most unwise way possible. And he doesn't think about the potential consequences of introducing this spot. And so, I hadn't thought of it from that specific vantage point before, but I think that's really interesting. I can totally see that.
Yeah, but I think what's so compelling about this story is that you can understand everybody's motivations. You know, you're like, oh, well, Judd wants the little girl not to lose her favorite pet when she's so young. He tries to preserve her innocence, right? But that totally backfires, right? Because her whole family ends up being dead, so there goes your innocence, right? But then you get why the dad would do it, right? Especially, and then as soon as, like, if you don't know anything about this, like, as soon as they introduce the whole point when he asks, like, has anyone ever buried a person up there? Like, he is totally going to bury a family member, a kid, his wife, I don't know what it's going to be, but you know it's leading to that at some point. So you're even way before the story does, and not in a bad way. You're like, oh, you're dreading when he does that because you know it's inevitable. And I'll say the most unsettling scene in the movie to me was really the flashback to the guy who buried his son. You know, and it was like the zombie son, and then Judd and his friends had to go like burn the house down, and he's trying to like control his son, but his son's just mindless zombie and like tackles him and like burns them both alive in the house. Like that, like out of all the creepy stuff in this movie, right? That's like the one that really stuck with me. Like that is unsettling on many levels, and it's just this it's right, but that just shows you, right? But you understand why the guy did it. You know, his son died in the war. You know, he's like, well, let me try this. Like, that's what people would do. If this was available to people, this is what they would do, and these are the consequences. And that's what. So there's not really any quote unquote real villains in this movie. There's just people making bad but understandable decisions over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's interesting that you think that that's the most disturbing one in it. Like, you know, for me, the most disturbing thing is that cutting the Achilles heel.
Well, that's the most like shock.
I know,
like,
I know what you're
gross,
saying,
right? But that's the one that sticks with you. That scene to me.
The part that I dreaded, I actually wound up stopping right before the scene, and then picking it back up a couple of minutes later was, the pivotal scene with the truck.
Mm-hmm.
Even back when I was much younger, I was very uncomfortable with that scene. But this is the laziest thing that I can fall back on. But everybody else does, so I will too. But like the whole as a parent thing, like seeing the kid, like it is the personification of every worst nightmare that a parent can possibly have.
Yeah,
it is. And additionally, I'd forgotten how close he was to grabbing him before he got to the road. And that just absolutely, I like the whole strength that Lambert brings to this is, despite any flaws that we might point to, is she connects with the human emotion that underlies everything in such an effective way that scene remains so impactful. Even though I know it's coming, I have to stop and take a breath before I get there.
You know, the directorial choice that she made that makes that scene over the top, like, which puts it over the top for me, is like right after it, when it cuts to the cameras, the photos, and you hear the camera sound, and it's just like the happy images of baby Gage that you see is really what puts it over the top, because it's like, this is what's just been lost. Rather than focus on violence or on any type of gore or anything like that, it's just focusing on the loss. And I think that's what's really powerful. And I think that was an amazing directorial choice on her part.
Agree.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it did feel like when it first started, I was like, what's going on here? And then I understood what they were trying to do. I was like, oh, okay, I get, because he's going through the memories and looking at the pictures. And and to your point there, Brandon, you don't see any gore, right? You just see the shoe. It's a very artistic way, right? If you can put such a flowery term to something so terrible, but an artistic way to show the kid, because you don't want to see that at this point. I mean, it's bad.
No.
It's bad enough. It focuses on the emotions and not the gore, and that's why it sticks with you, all these scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you don't see anything, but I'm sure that people think it gives you the impression, right, of seeing stuff, and then you see the aftermath with the overturned semi, right? You see the overturned semi at the end of it. So now I do have to ask Zach, because we just recently covered which vehicle hitting somebody and showing the shoe was done better, Pet Sematary or Mission Impossible 3?
Oh.
Very good. Very good. I guess J.J. Abrams took that from Mary Lambert. I got to give Mary Lambert the nod on that one, Brandon. Good.
Okay,
good call.
I'm okay with that.
But speaking of the kids, right? Because Gage is the kid that gets hit by the truck. Well, what is up with Ellie? What is up with these kids in these Stephen King movies and books, right? And they all have, does she have the shine from The Shining, right? Because she's having nightmares. She knows about the ghost, right? So it's like
Yes.
obviously Danny in The Shining. You have the blind girl from The Langoliers, right? These are these Stephen King tropes that you have, and it was weird to me. She kept having these nightmares, and there was really no explanation for it. But in a lot of these Stephen King things, there is no explanation.